from the Pro Cannabis Media Studios. I'm Jimmy Young, and I'm so excited that we have a very special guest in studio. No, she's not in studio. She's in our Zoom room. I guess that's the way we'll describe it. She's in our Zoom room. Her name is Dr. Mary Clifton, and of course, Alyssa Merrill from flowerandtonic.com is with us as well. Dr. Mary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be invited. Thank you for having me on your show.
Very challenging time for humans over the last week or so. One of the longest weeks in my lifetime, just waiting for the results, waiting for history to be written, if you will. That has to affect everybody's psyche in everywhere. And I think we saw an outpouring of joy by the public that I really didn't expect over the weekend. What were your impressions of this past week?
Oh, well, I was in New York City, actually walking down the Union Street Market is just, I think, the best farmers market in the world, at least the ones that I've seen so far. Although I still want to get to Bangkok and see those floating markets. I bet you they'll top Union Square. But I was on my way down there, and then all of a sudden, all of this honking. And so I opened up my phone, and there it was. And then the whole city was just like walking in on one party after another. We kept going to the next park, and down at Union Square, there was a bunch of people all getting together and dancing. And it was the best day to be in New York. It was probably one of my favorite days to be in New York of the whole time I lived there. So there are half of the people who are also very, very sad too. So we have to make sure as we move forward that we work on inclusion and make sure that everybody has opportunities to, live better and for their children to succeed and to be warm in the winter and, a little bit of cooled off in the summer, if you like, and some decent food. We all have to focus on everybody's needs and make sure everybody gets taken care of.
And that's a great opening statement, as it were, but isn't it amazing that even though there was this natural outpouring of emotion and celebration, I hear you using the words, everybody got together, and we're still in the middle of this pandemic, and it's so counter to the human element where we seem to need that togetherness and that connectivity, but we're also scared that we're going to get this horrible virus that's out there. And I'm guessing that plays a lot on everybody's emotions.
Oh, yeah. I feel like when I'm looking at a crowd of 150 people all, dancing in Union Square, I feel like the virus is there. It's like this, uninvited but ever-present guest to all of these experiences. And it does add this other level of anxiety and stress. But then, in places like New York and cities where people are really masking up and doing a good job with sanitation, I think that you can probably feel pretty safe in some of those circumstances. Because when I look at other places where they've done very good with virus control, people are standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the light to change at a street corner, for example, but they're all wearing a mask, and it's just the next level of sanitation. We're designed to move around in little nomadic packs of 100 people or so, and then get in touch with other tribes on rare occasions. So we're not really designed to be 6 million people in one city. So, we used to urinate in the streets. We used to expectorate in the streets. We don't do that anymore either. So it's probably a good idea to just put on a mask.
That's right. And that's a good balance. I like that. Alyssa, as the mother of 3, do you still have to worry about expectoration and being...
God, no, just the new COVID puppy is causing a problem. That's a horrible idea. I rushed out week 1 and got it, and that was a bad idea. But I do have a question for you. I'm struggling. I like to believe in karma, but I've got 3 girls and I have huggers. Like, they like to hug and they also hold doors for people. And the anxiety that I can sense in them when they're like, they go to hug someone and they stop themselves, or they go to hold the door and they realize they're too close. So I guess I'm trying to, and questions come to me a lot just because, again, I have 3 girls. People know I work in this industry. How do you differentiate anxiety versus depression? Because it's sad when you can't hug people, and it's sad, but then it's also Yeah.
It's all on the same trajectory, you know. I mean, I think some people, when they have problems where their serotonin or dopamine dips, probably because of a combination of, you know, experiences coupled with you not having enough time to take care of yourself and meet your own self-care needs, or more financial stress than people may be dealing with. The stress and anxiety can get really overwhelming right now. And on top of that, all of the work and family, you know, things that we always have to do with our kids and our partners isn't going away. So the stress becomes pretty monumental right now. So I think looking for an opportunity, I mean, I think you can handle your stress and anxiety in more of an adaptogenic way or in more of like a fundamental treatment way, in both cases with CBD or cannabis. You know, if you just need to try to smooth everything out and try to prevent yourself from inputting a bunch of memories in a really traumatic way, then using CBD or cannabis in small amounts just as an adaptogen, you know, to help you to frame your memories properly and move through the experience properly. But if you're having problems with not being able to stop crying, or not being able to get out of bed, or not being able to interact properly with the people that you want to work with, then a lot of my patients are settling out. You know, it's somewhere between 60 to 100 milligrams of CBD products given in divided administrations, like twice a day. So you can manage the daytime anxiety, but also help with the anxiety so that you can fall asleep. But it's not unusual for some people to go as high as 200 milligrams a day, just trying to get it under control. And the great thing about CBD or cannabis is you can get these great single source pre-rolls now for CBD or cannabis. So you can choose something like Harlequin or Cherry Pie, which is just great for depression, great for anxiety. As far as the cannabis community, all the CBDs are extraordinarily good for this work. And then, you know, just see what works best for you and get it on board.
Sure. Now, this is the first time I've heard of you many times, meeting you face to face. Can you just share a little bit more about your background for people who might not be familiar?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm the founder of CBDandCannabisInfo.com and the Cannabinoid Protocol, a coaching program, an educational program. We have cannabis coaches for businesses, but we also just provide education at whatever level it's needed. But I've been an internal medicine doc for 25 years and ran a small private practice, raised my kids in northern Michigan. And my brother died unexpectedly at 54 years old of colon cancer 5 years ago, and had a really uncontrolled, very difficult to manage death. And I was at the bedside trying to do everything right, and I couldn't get anything under control, his anxiety or his pain or anything. And my mom and I both agreed it was probably one of the worst deaths you'd ever have to witness. But after he died, I read a little bit about CBD. And cannabis. I had a few other experiences with patients who had great results. So I thought, I think I'll look into this and just prove to myself that there's no good research and you can't really use this stuff. And so I started reading, and then you know, now here I am with 200 videos and a teaching program.
Oh, I kind of knew that was going to be your answer, because you can tell people who come, I think, from this at an angle where they didn't believe. Like, I personally also was from the pharmaceutical industry, and I was looking for the, you know, what's the catch, you know?
Right.
And sounds like you were the same, but once you see it, it's like you know.
Well, yeah, I think I've smoked my body weight back in high school. I smoked like crazy, and I used to smoke almost every day. And in retrospect, I was using it to manage anxiety, and that was way back in the 80s in a little town in northern Michigan. We didn't really have a lot of room or understand how to do anything with anxiety or depression back then, and so I was just, I think, doing what I could, you know, and still getting by, getting great grades and hanging out with my friends and pursuing sports, but, you know, definitely needed that assistance. So, and then of course you get into medical school and residency and all that gets pushed to the side. But when I started to look back into it again, I was like, well, of course, that was what was happening way back then.
Right. So you have a lot of people like ADD. I know a lot of people have been coming to me with problems with ADHD, especially when working from home and there's all these distractions.
The ADD is such a great place to prescribe cannabis because it seems to on functional MRIs, on the PET scans that light up, it seems to light up your brain in the same way that Adderall does. It impacts the movement centers because part of what we have to do with ADHD people is help them to just sit still, and getting rid of that hyperactivity allows them to focus enough so that they can do something instead of just constantly being physically mobile. And we don't have great studies looking at ADHD, but a Duke researcher looked at over 200 chat rooms for various ADHD people and looked at all of the comments about cannabis and found like an 87% favorability for ADHD. People love to use it for that condition.
Yeah, and I sold Adderall, and it's and I knew that this was a safer alternative. So
oh yeah, I sold with Eli Lilly and Amgen and Medtronic and Forest. I sold for osteoporosis for 8 years. I was on speaker bureaus and traveled all over the country. I had a blast.
yep.
Well, Dr. Mary, I can admit this. I've admitted it many times. I love how you think back to when you were growing up in the 80s, okay? Because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and we didn't even know what ADHD was back then. I didn't get diagnosed with it until I was an adult. And of course, I said, come on, right? I can multitask. I can watch 4 games and take notes and still write at the same time. He goes, exactly. So it was an enlightening experience when I realized why at age 14, 15, 16, 17 in school, I would use this. Back then, it was not as potent as it is now, but it would help me hyper focus on the task, whether it was taking notes or I don't know how many tests I took under the influence, let's just say, but certainly I was able to focus on the task at hand much better. And to be honest, it also helped me behind the wheel of a car. And I know that's kind of weird to say that, but I took my driver's test high and passed.
That's so, I think when we're talking about, this is where I get nervous, legitimately nervous, because I think we're talking about there are certain products that will, like the terpenes, and it's not just cannabis. So there's some cannabis that can make you a complete idiot and you will have no focus and you will not know the next word you're going to say.
Right.
So it's like, that's where I get nervous with this industry. Because I agree, Jimmy, I know what you're saying, but like people who are coming here need your education is basically what I'm trying to say.
Well, there's a lot of things that impact driving, like sedating antihistamines or sedating antidepressants, pain medications, and cannabis impacts your driving too. But after 2 weeks of regular use of really any of those things, your driving should return back to normal. And at that point, it's difficult for you to know if somebody is using cannabis regularly unless they mix it with alcohol, because it does seem to be very difficult to become habituated to alcohol with driving as far as lane weave and response time.
No question about it. We understand that, we've interviewed other doctors, 8 times the effect. And again, there's a big difference between what is being sold in dispensaries now and tested now than what, we got back in the day in the 70s and early 80s, let's just say. So I understand that. But I will tell you this, you mentioned Adderall, and I know, Alyssa, you actually sold this stuff. You can imagine when a doctor diagnosed me as ADHD and he gave me a prescription for Adderall, I took it and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. Oh. I was bouncing off the walls. It was speed, and I don't need speed. I need focus, but I don't need speed, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it does help paradoxically, but it doesn't work for everybody. It definitely doesn't work for everybody.
3 days. 3 days. I was done with it. I don't have anything to do with it again. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And
There's so many prescription therapies. And, thank goodness you didn't have a good reaction to it, because you would have been back in that doctor's office once a month, sitting there for 3 or 4 hours, waiting for your appointment, getting your script, taking it to the pharmacy, waiting for it at the pharmacy. You'd be totally out of control of your medicine. You have to take it every single day or you'll get withdrawal. Or you can use some cannabis, and if you have a really difficult day concentrating, you haven't been eating properly, you're not sleeping, your relationships are are in the can and you can't get yourself organized, you can take more. Or if you have a day where you're really moving well and you've been meditating, then you only need like a little bit or none, then you take a lot less, and study after study shows that when you're in charge, then the amount of medication you take is less compared to if you just hand over that responsibility to your doctor. So it's super good for you to manage it with cannabis or CBD. You're going to use less over time.
I never knew that. That's really good facts for people.
The patient-controlled anesthesia that you get after they take your appendix out, or, they give you that little thing and they say, just press this button if you need it. Because we found that if you press that button, you're going to press it a ton less than if you have to get the nurse and the nurse has to get you the shot. Then people are like, I have a little pain. I don't want to get into too much pain. I'm going to call the nurse now. So they take a lot more medicine over time than if they just handle it on their own.
When I had my back surgery and was on the morphine drip with the little button, they limit it. You can only push it once every 10 minutes. I think that's what they do. They put some kind of a damper in there because...
A lockout, yeah.
Which was fine. But amazingly enough, ruptured disc, went in as Groucho Marx, 12 hours later, walking the halls, fine. I mean, it was... Modern medicine still...
Medicine is great for that. We have so many wonderful tools to help people if you break your leg or if you get in a car accident or if you need surgery. But boy, for ADHD, for anxiety, for, end of life stuff, we've got us, we've got cannabis, and that's where all of that should be tracking to.
Do you see an increase in research, more research now, perhaps, especially if the those who are in charge deschedule, take it off that Controlled Substances Act and open up? To me, that's one of the biggest growths of this industry is the future of research, because aren't you still scratching the surface on what we know about anxiety and depression and the role it has with the endocannabinoid system?
Oh, absolutely. And just scratching the surface on the relationships between the endocrine system, the systems in the gut, and how the gut microbiome responds to the endocannabinoid system, and then how that also affects thyroid and cortisol levels. All of those systems are in interplay all the time. But we also just need better and stronger data in anxiety and depression and all kinds of chronic diseases. And the research is very powerful. It can drive a lot of financial decisions and support pharmaceuticals, which I don't want this whole thing to go 100% pharmaceutical, but a little pharmaceutical cannabis would be really good for us because it'll move the needle for the entire industry.
Agreed. Well, I think it's so exciting. The products for autism. I mean, look at some of these conditions where, having children, it's like there are just no alternatives, and it's nice to just, it's an amazing opportunity, I think.
And the research in autism in Israel is so powerful and so exciting that they took 187 kids, I think, and gave them a high CBD, low THC cannabis, and it decreased their self-injurious behavior. They were able to dress themselves better. It's really remarkable improvements. So a lot of times we're using just a little bit of cannabis here and there when there's acting out behaviors and you need to get things under control. It's got such a great rapid onset with inhalation. So it works, I think, better than any other choice we have for helping somebody who's really feeling terrible. And I think the same is true you could fill in the blank there for any like acutely out of control problem, for stress or anxiety or nausea when you're in end of life, or, when your pain gets really jacked up. There's these methods of getting cannabinoids in the system very quickly through inhalation usually, and you get a great result immediately. Or it's in 90 seconds, which is pretty doggone immediately.
Great. Now, how do you feel about, you mentioned nausea, like it wasn't last week that there was a lot in the news about, taking cannabis when you're pregnant. And I have very strong opinions on like, I've seen women who have used CBD and conceived. I think it relaxes your body in a way. But I also, I don't know. I'm in the middle. I'd love your opinion on.
There's Jamaican research that would suggest that everything is fine with CBD or cannabis, but the overall, the research, and I would really love to poke a hole in this research and find it not true, but the research overwhelmingly says we really shouldn't use cannabis or other cannabinoid products when you're pregnant or breastfeeding. You're going to end up potentially with some intrauterine growth reduction. And, babies need to be, every ounce matters when you're a little peanut. So we really don't want to, if you've got a woman who's already got a little baby, then, and you impact it with cannabis, that's going to just be tough. I wish that we could move on that. I would love to say something different, but we can't.
I guess I totally agree. Like I prefer to be more, I guess, conservative in how I look at it. But what about Zofran compared, if you look at, right? I still feel better having someone, I still feel like it might be a better option than Zofran. That scares me. So I feel like that's at the end of the day where we're stuck at. So I agree that I want to say it's not safe. It's not good. But is it better than Zofran? Maybe.
Well, like with autism or with seizure or with, other disorders that impact children, and we're giving them cannabis, and oh my gosh, how can you give cannabis to a child? But then, all these other medications that you're giving the children are certainly impacting their neurologic development. But I mean, I've had patients in their early 20s that have been on these medicines since they were 8 or 10 years old, and they would love to get off them, but they're like, I have never had a brain that isn't on these medications, and I'm terrified of getting off of them. So they become a lifelong consumer or customer, if you want to look at it in a really negative way. But but you can't have a youngster going through misery without trying to help either. If you have a way to help them, then why would you not? But the best thing to do, I don't know if we'll ever have the answer to that question, because we're never going to take 10,000 kids and put half of them on cannabis and the other half not on cannabis and then see how they do. You always have a factor that leads them to trying it,
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things you just mentioned, we talk about a lot on this program, especially with Alyssa and some of the RNs that we have on. And it's all about the doctors that are your typical MDs that, don't know enough about this product to recommend it, are afraid of recommending it. It's still seen as a last resort for many people who are dealing with the anxiety and the depression or the chronic pain or any of the other diseases out there that it's interacted with. I'm talking about MS or Crohn's or epilepsy. Will we ever get to the point, or will it take a ton of research for the medical community as a whole to embrace the powers of this plant?
Well, this is what I'm hoping with the medical research. I'm hoping that we do find some situations where there's a particular cannabinoid that you can't necessarily find in high concentrations anywhere, but that if we pull it out and we refine it and we put it in an E. coli, medium, splice it in so that we can grow it in a very stable way and get the dosing right, then maybe we have a very powerful cancer medication. All of it taken together with all the terpenes and all the other cannabinoids is powerful, but maybe we have a super powerful one if we do the pharmaceutical research. And then in that case, why not do a synthetic cannabinoid and bring it in early rather than try to bring it in at stage 4 with, when almost all hope is gone. I agree that sometimes it strikes me as so odd that the very last thing someone would do is modify their nutrition and add cannabis in so many circumstances. But I think starting with lifestyle makes the most sense. It's crazy what people will do to their bodies before they look at something that is basically a weed. And I mean, it's basically a weed. We have an endocannabinoid system that our bodies are built with, so they're made to handle cannabinoids. And then we have a plant that grows like a weed all over our planet. I mean, if we weren't in a prohibition, it'd be growing, it's not growing in my ditch. I'm on the 23rd floor in Manhattan, but it's growing in somebody's ditch. They could probably get it to me pretty easily. I mean, it's a very simple, it's not difficult to grow unless you're doing some really great tricky stuff to get some different products. It makes sense that we should be using it as an adaptogen to stay healthy and well.
What's helpful is that we started this conversation talking about the 70s, right? And my mom didn't breastfeed. Like, it was not, I mentioned that all the time. Like, it was just only, she said, poor people breastfed. If you had the money to buy formula, you bought formula. And so maybe we're, like, that's my hope is that we're in the same direction with medicine. Like, we think there's only synthetic pharmaceuticals, and we're starting to explore this. So I hope
I do a lot of telemedicine, and there are so many people who have called for a 3-month refill on their blood pressure pills or their diabetes pills, but we really can't replace your in-person doctor. We can, do 1 3-month refill every year, but after that, you need to be seen in person. And people are like, well, how am I supposed to do that? Like, I don't have any money. My insurance is gone after I lost my job. And, it's not a position for me to say, well, have you considered cannabis? But there are so many situations where I think you could save a lot of money if you considered cannabis instead of what the doctor is giving you.
Now, Alyssa sends me different articles, interesting articles she finds, and one in particular today was about this product called Eucalyptol, which is like eucalyptus, but it's a terpenoid. Now, what's the difference between a terpenoid and a terpene? Any help there?
Boy, I think you're just looking at a slightly different chemical structure that's going to have probably some pretty potent antiviral effects. Thank you for reminding me, because when I was down at Union Square this weekend, they were selling eucalyptus, and I was like, I don't want to drag it all the way home because I had 2 bags full of food already. But I was like, I got to order some from the florist because eucalyptus is so naturally antiviral, very, very healthy for you to inhale. So I always buy some in the winter and hang it from the shower curtain, from the shower rod, and then it hydrates and it maintains that fabulous smell and is and it's naturally antiviral, which we all could use a little bit of that right now, right?
Absolutely.
And in this study, it was said it was especially it's an enchantment by eucalyptol, especially when doing math. And I feel like for all the people homeschooling right now, if anything's going to help my kid with math, I will throw it. I will spray it on them all day long. But yeah, I was talked about cognitive improvement and neuroprotection through eucalyptus. So I think hopefully more of this information will, but then I think we get stuck with how to use it. So you said you would put it in your shower, because that's where personally I get stuck. I don't know. I know eucalyptus is good, but then if I put the fake one in the fake diffuser, is it bad? Like there's some bad oils, right? That you don't want to diffuse.
Yeah. And then you worry about inhaling concentrated because, your lungs aren't designed to inhale concentrated oils. That's part of the concern about using vapes. Right. So yeah, that's the way that I use it. I'm not sure that there's a magic to it. I think it would also be really beautiful if you had an entry if you weren't on the 23rd floor in a little tiny box in Manhattan, if you had an entry table in your home, you could maybe put it there and it would be really beautiful. And, it does have a beautiful green, it stays nice for a long time. So it's a good time to get it. I mean, the flu is going to come in hardest end of December, January, February. That's really when we see the flu coming in hard, and sometimes into March. But, COVID is just continuing to march forward. It's been pretty aggressive this last month or so. So it might be a good thing to have right at the entryway, as we talk this through. It might be have it there, because just so that you have that, nourishing the air in that particular space. I also bought some green plants for whatever good it is. Some, like spider. Those spider plants are very good at cleaning the air. But I don't know if they clean the air of viruses and bacteria, but I'm spending more time indoors and I like the idea of a few green plants. I went on that website, Bloomscape, and they have all kinds of different plants that you can buy, and they send them to your house, and then they're all set to go. You pull them out, they're already potted. There's no fuss. You just water them.
Okay, that's up my alley.
Perfect. Yeah, for your windowsills back there. Do you have windows?
No, actually, I'm at my cottage because I'm at a little cottage because I need a little break from my math tutoring skills. So my husband's much better. I just thought I'd escape to a little cottage while it's warm. But yeah, like I was using tea tree oil obsessively at the beginning of COVID, and I was like more emotional than usual. And I didn't know the whole estrogen disruptor, like, but that is a very legitimate agent, but it might not have been a good idea to use as much as I was. So this works.
For vitamin C, vitamin C deficiencies don't exist very much, but when you get in the hospital, when you go from a general medical bed to an ICU, the frequency of vitamin C and vitamin D deficiencies increase, so that you're up around 20% of people that are in an intensive care unit that are vitamin C deficient. So getting the vitamin C and D and selenium and zinc are all a good idea. Right at the beginning of COVID, I put together a formulation and we called it Norona, Norona. We got a letter. We had to shut it down. But that was what it was. We got an FDA letter, but it was zinc, selenium, D and C, and some N-acetylcysteine, which is a mucolytic, so it thins the mucus.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a good combination. We had fun putting it together, but we didn't get any opportunity to sell it.
It's hard. I mean, I respect having regulations that people aren't, everyone's looking for a magic bullet, but then yes, even the scientists and doctors are having they can't access. It's unfortunate. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good research, but I think part of the reason that we've been able to keep cannabis under the rug for so long is because, you have the dietitians publishing in the dietitian journals, and the internal medicine doctors like me publishing in my journal, and the surgeons publishing in their journal. So I don't know really how to handle myself in an operating room. I haven't been reading surgical journals for years, not since medical school. So you do get in your little cubby and you quit looking up and seeing what other people are doing, So cannabis is publishing here and there, and then and really in their own journals. And so if you're not looking, you're going to miss some great stuff.
We'll certainly keep on top of everything that you're learning. And how can we visit a website, or what's the best way to follow what you're learning and doing? Because I'm on your same page. I think all the stuff that you're uncovering is fascinating. So
yeah, I'm going to actually do some work on psilocybin pretty soon. I'll publish a little bit on that, and I'm going to publish a few videos on perioperative management, because like you were saying, Jimmy, that there's some people that are, there's some issues with pain management around surgery. So I publish those new videos at cbdandcannabisinfo.com, and I share them through my newsletter. So there's always great CBD deals and fun things to share in my newsletter. And then if you're interested in becoming a coach, just getting educated, I have the cannabinoid protocol that I'm really thrilled about the growth of that this year.
Great.
Well, Dr. Mary Clifton, I have looked forward. I've read your newsletters for a long time, so I so appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and Alyssa here on our Medicinal Monday show of Cannabis Chat. And we know how to find you now, and I'm going to take you up on that offer, because you'd be an added addition on a regular basis on our program, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much, you guys. It's been such a great time for me.
All right, that's Dr. Mary Clifton from Manhattan and the CBD and cannabisinfo.com website. And of course, she's also available as a public speaker, and if she could fit you in, trust me, she's a very busy woman. We so appreciate her taking some time out and joining us here today.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.